What do the Oxford, Uvalde, and Richneck school shootings all have in common? All three could have been prevented. Hello and welcome to our Friday evening edition of True Crime and Wine Couple. We are Mary and Peter. Grab your wine. This is going to be long. Also, this is going to be different than our usual format because I'm going to be reading. I just received the document today. So it's going to be a long video and there's going to be a lot of reading. So if you don't like long videos where things are read to you, you might want to catch another video about this.
And I also want to add that this is probably one of the most disturbing grand jury reports I have ever read in my life.
I'm probably going to get unleashed. My Scranton accent is going to come out in full force. And I'm probably going to get angry. So it was very difficult reading this document today. I read this document before the video and I had a really hard time with this being a teacher. But without any more ado, I'm going to get into it. In the afternoon of January 6, 2023, Abigail Zwerner was shot with a loaded firearm by a 6-year-old student who will be referred to as the child in her first grade class. She survived after a bullet passed through her left hand and into her chest, causing a collapsed lung. What happened with this case is that's how it began, and then Abigail got 2 lawyers and she sued the school for $40 million. And the school did not want Abigail to sue and believed that this should be covered under workman's compensation. So what happened was a grand jury was assembled with 11 members of Newport News, of the community, and they assembled this grand jury to study what had happened, to investigate, and also to see if Abigail can move forward with her lawsuit. And I'm going to read their findings. So the special grand jury that was convened heard the testimony of 19 witnesses. They reviewed several hundred documents of school records and watched both police body cam and video footage. And they met to determine these 3 things. Address the question if there was any decision or action taken that would have prevented the events that occurred on January 6, 2023. They were going to make practical recommendations for improvement, and they were going to determine if any of the parties in the Newport News public school system, which will be referred to as NNPSS, administration should be criminally liable for their actions or lack of actions on January 6, 2023 in their duties to provide for the care and safety of the children attending Richneck. Okay, I'm going to go over the incident one more time because I had read that as an intro, but it's also in the report. On the afternoon of January 6, 2023, Abigail Zwerner, who will be referred to as Ms. Zwerner, was shot with a loaded firearm by a 6-year-old student, the child in her first grade class. She survived after a bullet passed through her left hand and into her chest, causing a collapsed lung. A classroom of 15 vulnerable 6- and 7-year-old children witnessed the shooting firsthand. Several hundred elementary-age children and teachers throughout the school felt fear and panic during the event. Parents of those children suffered through terror as they stood in the parking lot waiting for hours to find out what happened, wondering if their child was alive. This is the finding of facts. So one of the first things that occurred was during the 2021-2022 school year, and that is referred to as the choking incident. On September 27, 2021, Ms. White was concluding breakfast with the students when the child went to dump his breakfast in the hallway trash can and never returned. Ms. White went to search for him and found him with the security guard. When Ms. White tried to take his hand and bring him back to class, the child hit Ms. White and yelled, "No, I don't want to go back to class." The child then aggressively twisted and pulled down on the security guard's wrist. Due to his behavior, the security guard took the child to Dr. Parker, while Ms. White returned to class. Subsequently, a counselor returned to the class with the child and told him to sit down. At some point, Ms. White was sitting in a kid's chair teaching the class. The child went up behind Ms. White, placed his forearms in front of her neck, and pulled down so hard she couldn't breathe, choking her. The teacher assistant saw Ms. White being choked by the child and rescued her by pulling the child's arms off and removing him from the class. So Ms. White's teacher assistant took over the class, and Ms. White went to talk to Dr. Parker and Dr. Goodman. And she kept a copy of the referral form that she wrote for herself. She explained what happened, to which Dr. Parker did not respond at all, and Dr. Goodman responded by saying, prioritize. I take it getting choked by a child is not a priority in your life. While the school counselors and SROs were frequently involved in assisting Ms. White with the child's behavior previous to this incident, no functional behavior assessment or behavioral intervention plan was initiated prior to this incident or after. Okay, so I should probably break that down a little bit. This child was never referred for special education services, which, if you don't understand special education, it's a very long and convoluted and difficult process. However, if any child should have been referred for special education services, this child certainly should. And I say that because I'm a special education teacher and I understand how that works. Also, with the behaviors such as choking a teacher, a functional behavioral assessment should have been conducted. That is a report that tells you what the motivation for the behavior is. Because in functional behavioral analysis, the theory is that you need to know what motivates the behavior in order to remediate it. Okay, so what that would do was say why the student did the behaviors he did, and then it would give a plan for him to rectify those behaviors. The administration instead decided that the child would be sent back to preschool and attend a different school. However, there was a subsequent clear lack of communication of that plan when the child returned the next day and was sitting in Ms. White's class. Ms. White thought he was being sent away, eating his breakfast. Ms. White immediately went to see Dr. Parker about it and told Dr. Parker that either she, Ms. White, would leave or the child, but they would not be in the same class together. After this ultimatum, the child was then removed and sent to a different school. So it took the teacher basically saying, it's him or me. Now, for people watching who are appalled that this would happen in a school, I can tell you it happens all the time. Teachers are assaulted and it's swept under the rug. Because what happens is the school, to get funding, the less behavioral incidents they have, the better they do. So they will sweep a lot of these things under the rug. So you have any thoughts about that?
Same with academics too, right? They pad the academics because their funding is dependent upon that.
Yes, and they will also, rather than have a student drop out who's not doing any work, we'll just let the student sit in class and do nothing and pass the student so that it helps their graduation rate.
Graduation rates, right.
So this sort of thing goes on in schools all the time. And if you've been watching the news lately, you probably can understand what happens if you follow the Crumley case.
Right.
Basically, everything just gets swept under the rug and swept under the rug and swept under the rug. Okay. So now the report examines the 2022-2023 school year. And they notice that there are immediate security issues, which is very troubling to me if I had a child in that school. Well, it is just as a teacher who cares about kids. At the start of the 2022-2023 school year, Brianna Foster, aka Brianna Foster Newton, Ms. Foster, was the principal, and Dr. Parker was again the assistant principal. First, Richneck did not have a consistent full-time security resource officer, which is known as the SRO. The testimony by Dr. Parker was that if an emergency happened when the SRO was not present, it was known that the teachers could call the non-emergency police number or the surrounding SRO who was at another location.
I have a question about that real quick.
Okay.
Why would they have them call the non-emergency number if there's an emergency? Why not just call 911?
Because
that's going to get the immediate response.
This school apparently lacked some pretty clear policies and safety measures. However, that SRO did not have a work phone, and there was not a number posted anywhere in the school that would inform any faculty what number to call. So there you go. That's why no one could call him, because they couldn't. So this is interesting. The front door system was set up so that an individual who wanted to gain entry to the school would buzz or call the main office in order to be let into the building. Guess what? The system was broken 4 weeks prior to January 6, 2023, which often happens at schools too. Things get broken and never get fixed.
This is amazing to me, because when my daughter was in elementary school, so we're going all the way back to 2005, 2006, if you went to the school, you had to press the button, there was a camera, you had to identify yourself, and then they would either buzz you in or not buzz you in. And this is 20 years ago, when the technology wasn't as great as it is now, and they can't even get that right.
Parents were not happy with this. As you can imagine, if a parent went to pick up their child, they would have to bang on the door until somebody let them in. And parents complained, and it never got fixed. One parent even suggested a fundraiser to the administration to fix the door. And guess what? It still didn't get fixed. Also, the school had never conducted lockdown drills, which is very troubling if you watch the news. Because these kids need to know, and teachers need to know what to do in a lockdown situation. And these drills should be conducted regularly and without knowing. Every student and every teacher in that building should think that it is a real situation, because you don't know how you'd act until a real situation.
How many lockdown drills have you had this year?
I think we normally have about 4 or 5 a year.
And how many fire drills do you have?
You have to have 1 fire drill per month, which to me is ridiculous, because so many of these schools are made of so much asbestos. The new wing of my school was built in the 70s, okay, so...
The new wing.
The new wing. So we know that that school is not burning down, because they didn't make junk back then, and we probably have so much asbestos in the school that I'm surprised they don't have cancer yet. But anyway, finally, the second grade classrooms did not have doors or permanent walls. So there was no way to secure those kids. Any thought about that? You already?
Well, you just think about some of the school shootings that we've seen, and those active shooters going into the schools. They would go up to a locked door and then they just move on. Well, here there's no doors. They just run rampant all through the school.
It has to be terrifying as a teacher. And your students want to know. Like, I have some I'm a special education teacher. I teach regular ed too, but I'm mostly special education. And I have some students that have been through so much trauma that they want to know what I'm going to do in a lockdown. And I tell them, I'm going to spray that mofo in the eyes with Lysol. I have a baseball bat in my room. I said, we're going to block the door. Like, they know the plan, and they know that I am going to act, and I'm going down fighting. And these and these are, like, I teach high school. These are babies.
Yeah,
these
exactly.
Are people, okay. So next in the report is modifications made for the child. Despite the fact that the child had never completed kindergarten, was not at the same reading level of his peers, and that he had enough documented substantial behavior problems known by Dr. Parker to have him physically removed from the school the year prior, the child was placed in Ms. Zwerner's first grade class with a total of 23 students enrolled in that class.
It's a big class for...
That's actually a decent sized
Is
class.
it?
Most classes are about 30 kids.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine 30?
No. 36-year-olds, no.
So when the child came into Ms. Zwerner's class, he immediately exhibited behavior problems similar to the year prior. He was reckless, physically aggressive, used profanity toward the teachers, and even choked another student. Due to his behavioral problems, the principal, Ms. Foster, the assistant principal, Dr. Parker, the reading specialist, Amy Kovac, Ms. Zwerner, and the child's mother, Deja Taylor, started the Student Success Team process, also known as the SST, in a meeting on September 20th, 2022. The parties met again on October 18th, 2022, and December 13th, 2022. So they did meet regularly for 3 months. So the student success process is basically an intervention done at a general education level before any special education services kick in. And it could be the student goes and reads one-on-one with the teacher, the student goes and gets tutoring from, a peer, a positive peer. You might have the student in a peer group at lunch so he can make friends and, socialize.
Now, is this a necessary step to get the special education services?
It depends on the
or-
school's policy. I would think that in this case, the egregious behavior should have warranted the immediate process to begin. But what happens is if the parent denies special education, you have to go to due process, which is court, which costs the school a lot of money, and then the child in the meantime stays in his previous placement. But in this case, the child would have gone back to the school he was in, because that's where the program had been.
Right.
However, with no special education paperwork, the kid basically stays where he is.
Yeah.
In addition, the parents of the other children in that class that did not, so here's what happens. Okay, so this was the plan. So the plan that they came up with was the child's school hours were reduced to a few hours in the morning, having him arrive by bus at 9:20 and leave for the day around 11. So that's a really short day. And he was accompanied by a parent. So the school never did a background check on the parents, and it turns out the father had a criminal history. Okay, in order to go into a school, my friend who's a chemistry teacher does chemistry demonstrations at her son's school, which is in a different district in a different state, and she has to get a background check.
And they do FBI background checks, right? They're not just a general background, it's like a,
When you're employed by a
24-1.
school, you do a background check. For Pennsylvania, I think it's just a state police check.
oh, okay.
So they basically do, but for me to be employed in New Jersey, I had to get fingerprinted.
Right.
Pennsylvania, I never had fingerprinting.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So every
so-
state's different.
Every state might be different, yeah.
So it is possible that Virginia does not mandate background checks?
No, according to this, they must mandate background checks
Oh, okay.
because, even if it's just a state police background check. What you basically do is you send a copy of your license into the state. They review it, make sure you're not convicted of anything, and then they okay
Right.
you. That's how that goes for the state background check.
Yeah.
Although the SST process was initiated for the child, neither school administration or a school psychologist implemented a functional behavior analysis. That's what I described as assessing why the child was doing the behaviors. Typically that's related to functional behavioral assessment, and it's used a lot with kids on the autism spectrum. But it can also be used for kids that are exhibiting egregious behaviors. There was no behavioral intervention plan, which they could have done a behavioral intervention plan without the IEP and just said, if Joe Schmo does this, we're going to do this,
Right.
And he was never given an individualized education program, which would have provided substantially more services for the child. In addition, he was not recommended or considered for an alternative school placement or an emotionally disturbed ED classroom that may have better addressed the child's behavior issues.
And in this case, at the minimum, he should have been in an ED class, right? With the behaviors that he exhibited before this.
When they did the evaluation, I would think this was a child who was emotionally disturbed, yes. I can't say, I don't know the child, I'd have to
Right,
be in
but
the meeting and I'd have to help make the determination. But yes, I would think that this child would fit right in.
But aren't those programs sort of based on past behavior?
You have to have an IEP saying that you need that. That's a
So that would
special.
be part of the IEP?
That'd be part of the IEP, because that is a specially designed instruction class.
Okay.
Now, a lot of schools will have like an alternative program that you don't have to have an IEP to go to, but they don't mention this here. An emotionally disturbed classroom, you would need an IEP. Which, based on these behaviors, I believe could have easily been obtained and implemented.
Right.
That's just my professional opinion. Updated new plan for the child. So on December 13th, 2022, another meeting was held for the child regarding the school safety team. Dr. Parker, I'm sorry,
I
student
found
success
I found
team.
this interesting.
Student success team, I apologize. Dr. Parker, Ms. Zwerner, Ms. Kovac, that's the reading specialist, and Ms. Taylor, that's the principal, were all present. It was agreed by all parties at the SST meeting that the child's behavior had improved enough to elongate his hours from 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. A parent would also no longer be required to sit with him. So now you're going from less than 2 hours of school a day to 3.5. That's quite a change for such a young child.
And the fact that they all agreed that his behavior was getting better, well, did they ever think that maybe that correlated to the parent being in the room with them? And that as soon as the parent wasn't in the room with them, he's just going to go back to previous behaviors?
The right way to do this, myself being a special education teacher, I feel like I could speak about this, would have been maybe add a half hour at a time and slowly phase out the parent.
Right. Not just a big.
So the
drastic
parent
change.
goes and hangs out in a room by themselves for a half hour while the child is left unattended with the teacher, see how that goes. That would be something that I would work out if that were my student. Upon returning to school on Tuesday, January 3rd, the new plan was implemented. On January 4th, 2023, the child became defiant during recess. He refused to join his reading group, constantly spoke back to Ms. Zwerner, and refused to participate in the lesson. During reading time in small groups, the child grabbed Ms. Zwerner's phone off the table, held it up high while staring her down, and slammed it to the ground. The phone case flew off, causing the phone to crack. Ms. Zwerner then had to walk the child to the other first grade class to communicate for assistance, as there was only one shared walkie-talkie. So in a building with no way to buzz in and no doors, they only had one walkie-talkie. Brilliant, Richneck Elementary School. I get so angry. Between the two classrooms and two teachers. When the child retrieved his belongings, he told Miss Zwerner, "I'm never coming back to your room again, you," rhymes with which. He was suspended for 1 day. Okay, can we just talk about this for a minute? This was a pointed attack that this child made to the teacher. He knows the value of a cell phone to somebody. He knows the value of a cell phone to him if he has one, or his parents if they have them. That was a pointed way to upset her and make her angry, in my opinion. And that was a very personal attack on
And this was the first day back, right? This was was this the first, well, first or second, either one, after they, or it was actually the first or the second day where the parent wasn't in the room with them. And already the behavior escalated. So at that point, in my opinion, and I'm not a teacher or anything, so I don't have.
After that,
anything.
a parent should have come back in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Shouldn't they at that point suspended him until they had a new plan in place?
Imagine you're a parent of a child in a room with this kid.
Well, from what I understand, the parents knew nothing.
Exactly. And there is confidentiality that you can't breach the confidentiality of the child, but if other parents' children are in danger, they need to know. The child returned on January 6th, 2023. He was taken to lunch by Ms. Zwerner from 11:15 to 11:45 a.m. He immediately started showing signs of aggression, including threatening to beat up a kindergarten student and staring down a security guard and moving towards her like he was ready to pounce. Ms. Zwerner went to Dr. Parker's office. Dr. Parker was sitting at her desk, typing at her computer and looking at the screen. Ms. Zwerner told Dr. Parker that the child was in a violent mood. Dr. Parker did not respond. Dr. Parker did not look away from her computer screen. Dr. Parker did not acknowledge Ms. Zwerner's presence. Oh, and it gets worse. That's your job. And I said to Pete, I said, that would be like me ignoring my students. Like my student comes and tells me, hey, Billy threatened me, and I just, if a teacher did this, there would be so much outrage.
Mm-hmm.
Only after Ms. Zwerner walked away, isn't that interesting, did Dr. Parker say to Ms. Kovac, the reading specialist, who was standing there, tell her that she can call his mom at any time and she can pick him up early. While saying this, Dr. Parker was sitting next to her office phone, and Ms. Zwerner was returning to line up her students to go back to class. You're in charge of the discipline. You have the phone. Abby has 23 students to worry about. What is your problem, woman? This part's interesting too. So then Ms. Kovac was then walking in the hall when two students ran up to her saying that the child had a gun in his back. Ms. Kovac took the initiative to enter Ms. Zwerner's class where the child was sitting. His backpack was next to his desk. She sat next to him and asked if he had a gun. He said no. She asked if she could look in his backpack. He said no. A 6-year-old tells you don't look at his backpack and you listen? Ms. Kovac continued to sit with him for approximately 45 minutes for his lesson and watch him. She did not, however, search his backpack at the time. And what I should say is I really think these teachers were afraid to act. I think they were afraid to go against the school policy. Because in the school policy, you have a chain of command. I have learned after Uvalde that if anything goes down, by the time somebody gets their life together in my school and picks up a phone, no offense to the people in my school, I'm calling 911. That is what I learned from Uvalde. And I think, in fact, I have a student teacher, and I told her today, after reading this, she was sitting in my room working, and I was working, and I said, if you ever feel threatened, you call 911 on your cell phone. Do not wait for anybody. Do not call anybody. You call 911 yourself. You get the cops there, because that is the best thing to do. And it really is annoying to me that this reading specialist is taking all this initiative here to help this woman,
Right.
to help Abby, and the person who is supposed to is just blowing her off.
And it gets a lot worse.
Before recess started, the child asked if he could change his shoes. Ms. Kovac said yes and left the room to report to Dr. Parker per protocol. Ms. Kovac told Dr. Parker, like I said, per protocol. Ms. Kovac told Dr. Parker that the students had told her that the child would not let her check his what the students had told her, and that the child would not let her check his backpack and was acting unlike his normal self, where he would usually be throwing his backpack around. Dr. Parker said, "I know," to him throwing the backpack around, and then said nothing else about it. When Ms. Kovac finished reporting it to Dr. Parker responded with orders for Ms. Kovac to return back to oversee state testing by 1 p.m. Parker did not inquire further with any questions, took no further action, and did not appear to show concern. Around 12:20 to 12:30 p.m., Ms. Zwerner was lining the students up for recess. Ms. Zwerner saw the child put on a gray, oversized zip-up jacket with a hood. He then rummaged through his backpack and put both his hands in the pockets. Ms. Zwerner did not see the child remove his hands until later that day. Ms. Kovac went back to Dr. Parker. Ms. Zwerner texted Ms. Kovac what she had observed. So then Ms. Kovac went back to Dr. Parker and told her that she had searched the backpack and found nothing. So then she finally did search the backpack. She also explained that Ms. Zwerner had reportedly observed the child put something in his jacket pocket and was not taking his hands out of his pockets. Dr. Parker responded, "He has little pockets." Dr. Parker took no further action. In addition, Ms. Foster, the principal, was not informed of these events as she was in and out of meetings all day. The testimony from all parties was that they reported the firearm to Dr. Parker and not Ms. Foster. And that is typically what you'll do in a school. If the vice principal is in charge of discipline, that's who you report to as a teacher. You don't report to your principal. You report to your principal for other things like personnel matters. The child was now at recess with 30 plus other small children running around the playground with a firearm tucked into his jacket. The child was constantly running behind a rock wall with his friend, where the teachers were not able to see them. After recess, Ms. West called a friend over to her classroom to find out what was going on. The friend was visibly scared and shaking. He said the child would hurt him if he told her. She encouraged him to tell her. He said that the child had a gun and that the child had showed him the bullets. Ms. West then spoke on the phone with John Sims, who was temporarily covering the receptionist's lunch. where Ms. West relayed what the friend had told her. He told Dr. Parker, who responded, that the backpack had been searched. Ms. West then had a counselor come to her class and speak with the friend, which is what you would do in this situation. The friend told the counselor that the child had bullets and said that the child had threatened him if he told anyone. At approximately 1:40 p.m., the counselor, now the third person and fourth time this message had been relayed, went back to Dr. Parker and communicated the child either had a gun or ammunition at the very least. He asked if the backpack had been checked or if it had been checked. That doesn't make sense. If it had been checked, then can we please search the child's person? A decision that could have changed the course of this day. Per the school's written policy and the school administration manual, principals and school security officers under the direction of the school administrators may search students and students' property when there's reasonable suspicion to do so. So basically, the principal had the authority to search. The teachers really didn't. Dr. Parker had the authority per school policy to either give permission or to conduct a search of the child. Dr. Parker said no. Dr. Parker said hold off. Dr. Parker said his mom would come pick him up soon. The child was not searched. The child was not removed from class. The police or SRO was not called. The counselor went to Miss Zwerner's class and told her he was not given authorization to search the child. The child was at his desk by himself, staring into space with a loaded firearm tucked into his jacket. And I love the way they write this report because they really drive it home. Like those 4 lines that I just read were isolated and compressed. At 1:15 p.m., Miss Zwerner was sitting at the reading table. She saw the child turn his whole body towards her. The child, for the first time since before recess, removed his hand from his pocket holding a firearm. He pointed it directly at Miss Zwerner and, at less than 6 feet away, pulled the trigger and shot Ms. Zwerner. Ms. Zwerner looked down to see a pool of blood forming. The child continued to stare at her, not changing his emotional facial expressions as he tried to shoot again. The firearm had jammed due to his lack of strength on the first shot, inhibiting him from shooting Ms. Zwerner or anyone else again. The firearm had a full magazine with 7 additional bullets ready to fire if not for the firearm jamming. At the loud bang of the firearm, a small 6-year-old girl sitting at her desk tried to run but was pulled back by the headphones on her head. In terror, she was able to remove them and run out. Another little 6-year-old boy at the back of the class all of a sudden felt as if Miss Zwerner was far away. To this day, he will not talk to anyone about what happened. All the children ran across the hall into Miss West's classroom. She proceeded into lockdown procedures with 45 children huddled in her room. The friend then said,
With no door.
"Is she a 2nd grade teacher?" Because it was the 2nd grade that didn't have the doors.
Oh, I don't know.
The friend then said, "I told you. I tried to keep you safe. I told you." A 6-year-old. Oh, it's disgusting. All right, now's when this thing gets really maddening. If you're not angry enough, wait till you hear what went down in the main office. I need wine for this. In the main office, Ms. Foster was in her office with 2 children, and Dr. Parker was outside her door. At the receptionist desk was a grandmother of a student in the building. The receptionist and a small boy sitting in a chair with his feet dangling. A woman suddenly rushed in saying, "Someone's been shot," and ran into Dr. Parker's office. Dr. Parker went into her office and closed the door until the police arrived. Ms. Foster also closed the door. The receptionist, confused by the lack of information and lack of direction, found her composure, called 911, and locked down over the PA system. The small boy started crying, to which the grandmother, neither employed by the school or trained in lockdown procedures, jumped into action. After knocking on the principal's door saying there was a child out in the main room, and both Dr. Parker and Miss Foster's doors remained shut, the grandmother comforted the boy by telling him that she won't let anything happen to him and go hide in a place where no one can find him. The boy squeezed his little limbs in the tight space between the copier and the wall and sat all alone waiting until the grandmother retrieved him when it was confirmed to be safely. heartbreak for this little boy. In the meantime, Ms. Zwerner had walked from her classroom down the hall and into the main office, where she passed out in front of Ms. Foster's door. Ms. Foster opened the door, saw Ms. Zwerner, and shut the door again, telling the two kids in her office to get into the bathroom. Ms. Foster then emerged from her office while the grandmother applied pressure with the rag to Ms. Zwerner's wound until the paramedics arrived. The grand jury will note that there were some contradictions in the testimonies as to the above-noted proceedings in the main office as to who was involved. However, the grand jury finds that the most credible testimony was that Dr. Parker and Mrs. Foster acted in the manner described above. The classroom with no doors. Down the hall, the second grade class heard a bang. Since there were no doors, the second grade teacher could see students running across the hall. She then gathered two classes of 7 and 8-year-old children and brought them into the hall and then down the hall in order to access the safe room. While sitting in the safe room, children were crying while one boy tried to comfort his classmates, telling him that it was going to be okay. After his father picked him up from Richneck that day, the boy slept in his parents' room for almost a year so that he could feel safe. If you're a teacher and you're watching this, we've all been here. Obviously I've never been shot and the door slammed in my face. We've all been treated like crap by other teachers, by students, by administrators. We've all brought a concern to an administrator and been treated like crap and been blown off. And if you have a principal now like mine who treats you like a human being, you're very grateful and you're very fortunate, because that's not how it is for teachers nowadays. Prompt police response. Now this was really interesting, because when I think about how Uvalde responded,
Yes.
the police did the right thing here and the school didn't. Okay. So Deputy Blythe heard the call to arrive at the school, and he was there in less than 3 minutes. Due to the door buzzer system being broken, he could not access the school. There were two deputies, Blythe and Briggs. They banged on the door, they called the intercom system, and even considered trying to shoot out the glass to gain access. Great, just traumatize the kids more. After almost a full minute waiting and banging at the broken door, a custodian roaming the halls saw the deputies and let them in. Just prior to this, Ms. Kovac had emerged from her classroom and heard the shot. She rushed into Ms. Werner's classroom, where the child said to her, "F you," but the real word that rhymes with duck, "I shot my teacher." The firearm was on the ground. She pulled him away from it, sat in a chair, and wrapped her body around the child and held him until law enforcement arrived. When law enforcement arrived, they observed the situation, secured the firearm, and asked Ms. Kovac if she was okay. The child became agitated and punched Ms. Kovac in the face in front of 2 police officers. He was removed from the building by law enforcement, where he and his parents were interviewed. The child admitted to accessing the loaded firearm from his mother's purse, the same place he had accessed the marijuana. Class post-shooting and lack of communication. Parents began to arrive at Richneck sometime after 2 p.m. It was not because the school had contacted them. The consistent testimony from parents was that the earliest they received notification from the school was after dinner that evening, when they arrived home, if they heard from the school at all. Most parents found out via the news, a group chat, social media, or some other roundabout means that a shooting had occurred at Richneck. Effect on parents, legal guardians, and children. For whatever reason, there was a general feeling among the faculty that certain decisions lay within the realm of administration and that their responsibility was to report it to the administration to take further steps. They basically examined, why didn't a teacher call 911? Why didn't a teacher call the cops? And I think that these teachers were afraid to not follow policy, in my opinion. But after this, I'm sure they will call 911.
Yes.
For parents who wanted to transfer their child to a different location due to the traumatic effects this had on their child, particularly for those children who had witnessed the shooting, the school, including the administration, was difficult, obtuse, and quite frankly insensitive. The friend who was running behind the rock wall with the child and reported the firearm is currently in therapy as he struggles with guilt that this was somehow his fault. He did not want to go back to Richneck because he had spoken up about it, but nothing had been done. His mother is also in counseling due to this event. She immediately asked for her son to be able to transfer schools after the incident due to his statements to her. A transfer was refused. The friend finished the semester at Richneck, and his mother once again tried to get a transfer approved. A transfer was refused again. It wasn't until she obtained a lawyer that the transfer to a different school was approved. Then they have some other incidents where parents with traumatized children could not get their kids transferred. The grandmother who sprang into action and applied pressure to Ms. Zwerner's wounds to this day struggles with being able to sleep at night as a result of her experience. A lot of PTSD here. On January 25th, 2023, law enforcement executed 2 search warrants to obtain the child's school records and files from Richneck. The first search warrant was for the records stored in the database Synergy at the school administration building, and the second search warrant was for the 2 physical files at Richneck. Records from administration. So Newport News Public Schools provided the following disciplinary records of the child to law enforcement. 9/21/21. Striking staff, no injury, no suspension. 9/6/2022. Reckless behavior, endangering others or self, 1-day suspension. 1/4/2023. Damage to schools or personal property, 1-day suspension. The electronic disciplinary records from Synergy did not include any other incident, including the September 27th, 2021 choking incident with Miss White or the incident referral form that she had turned into administration. Missing files at Richneck. There were believed to be 2 physical files in the school for the child, one located in the main office and one located in Ms. Zwerner's classroom. When law enforcement executed the search warrant to obtain these files, they were not found. Every other student's file was in both locations. The child's file was the only file that was in neither location. The returned file was missing all the child's disciplinary records, including the incident referral form provided by Ms. White about the choking incident. There was never any record recovered on the school's end about Ms. White being choked by the child. The choking incident was only confirmed through interviewing Ms. White and her providing her own copy, go Ms. White, of the referral form that she had kept for her personal records. Teachers, if it ain't in writing, it ain't.
You keep everything.
Special education teachers very easily learn to cover their butt. The second file that was believed to have been in Ms. Zwerner's classroom was never found. Now, what I should say is this is very interesting because when her lawyers held the press conference, they basically said Ms. Zwerner left that building in an ambulance. And she didn't return until I believe it was July to get the room ready for the next year, which I'm assuming was to get her things out. And then when she did return to get her own things, she got a trespassing notice. I'll do with that as you will.
This school is just, it's messed up from top to bottom. Because this is coming from not only administration, the school board, superintendent, this is just one full school district full of either incompetence, criminals, I don't even know what you want to describe.
You know how you always say the cover-up is worse than the crime?
Yes.
This is a case where the cover-up was as bad as the crime. The crime was pretty darn bad.
I think the crime was worse, but the cover-up made it even worse.
Okay, now they talk about the student study team and the IEP process. From 2021 to 2022, instead of implementing a behavioral intervention plan, functional behavioral assessment, or student study team, he was sent back a full grade. So they didn't do anything about the fact that he, needed this special programming. According to the consistent testimony of all the involved parties in the SST process, Dr. Parker never considered starting a behavioral intervention plan, functional behavioral analysis, or IEP. In addition, she never considered alternative education settings that would have been more appropriate for his needs. The child would have greatly benefited from an IEP, which would have opened the door to many resources that were currently not available to him in the general classroom. However, the SST process was very slow moving to get an IEP due to the length of time between meetings. So basically, the IEP process was never initiated. Because if you initiate the IEP process, this timeline is very, very strict, and if the school doesn't follow the timeline, they can be held criminally responsible. So I'm assuming that nothing to say that, you know. Then this is really interesting. So the school had a mini referral system, and this is what a lot of schools are moving toward now. They're moving toward what they call restorative practices, which means that if a child acts out in class, they go to the principal gives them a pep talk, usually Skittles, sometimes a soda, and sends them back to class. Yes, if you're not familiar with school discipline, that's pretty much what they do.
And you see this firsthand in your school.
My school does a lot more than most, and I'm happy with the discipline. Usually I just need a kid to get out of the room so they can, get themselves together. Because once they come back, we're okay. It's just a kid. But yes, a lot of teachers that have more egregious things happening. We also have a school resource officer, and he does come and get the kids. So my school is better than I'd say 80% of most. The testimony was that the mini referral system was used for the 2022-2023 school year, per Ms. Foster's direction. However, that system is currently not being used at Richneck, and behavioral incidents are reported directly into Synergy. You do it right now? This is more appropriate solution for documentation, as the mini referral system was not objective in its reporting, created a lack of accountability, and were records that became inaccessible at a later time. Another thing that's confusing to me, but probably because I'm a special education teacher and the student was never referred, the way they describe the incidents is not very observable. Or for Ms. Zwerner to go, the woman was teaching 3 years, I've been teaching 32, I'm special education, she's general ed. To go and say he's in a violent mood, I never would have done that. I would have, said what the specific behavior was. Right. I would have told him in observable terms. And a lot of the ways these things are like, all right, the student did not complete the assignment, or the student would not begin the assignment. Like I try to be, and it seems like a lot of this stuff is a lot of gray, it's a lot of gray area where they report. Secrets from the parents. It is completely inappropriate that the Richneck administration kept information from the other parents of the children in Ms. Zwerner's class and the entire school that compromised the children's safety. There were 3 specific areas that vital information was withheld from parents. First, Richneck administration made the decision to allow the child's parents, either his mother or father, to sit with him in class without informing the other parents of this decision. A basic background check was not even conducted. So I'm assuming basic background check was just check his license.
Right.
They don't say fingerprinting, or they don't say specific. Second, one parent testified that during the 2022-2023 school year, her son was choked twice by another student in his class. The student was the child. However, she was never provided any other information, including that it was the child who was the perpetrator, or that he had a history of such behaviors, such as choking his kindergarten teacher, which you normally would not tell a parent. But obviously the grand jury has a problem with that, Third, the school did not provide any information to the parents at the time of the shooting. That is a big problem. The parents of the children attending the school are the first line of defense and final decision makers for their children, not the school. I absolutely agree. When an elementary age child is sent to school by their parent, that parent should have the peace of mind that the child is going to a safe learning environment where they will be taught reading, writing, and math. And I also think that they mean that where people will make the right decisions to protect their child.
Right, exactly.
And see, this is my belief. The Crumbleys were responsible for their son, absolutely. But this woman was responsible for every child in that school.
Yeah.
She was responsible to keep those kids safe.
Right.
Unaddressed security issues for the 2022-2023 school year. Okay, here's all the issues. The front door buzzer system was not being fixed for weeks on end, and no security as to who comes and goes in and out of the school. No doors on the second grade classrooms. No consistent full-time school resource officer at any time. Not every teacher having a walkie-talkie or consistent means of communication with each other or to the front office. The emergency button not working in each classroom. No consistency in training for the faculty or protocol established for a variety of emergencies. Keeping secrets from the parents of the other children in Miss Zwerner's class and allowing unchecked parties to sit in the classroom. Although these parties, including the administration, not just at Richneck, but those working in the upper echelons of decision-making in the Newport News public school system, may not be criminally liable in court for the security shortcomings, they are culpable nonetheless by their lack of action when they had full knowledge of the security issues at Richneck. Parents testified that these were issues that they tried to bring to the administrator's attention, and the parents were repeatedly dismissed. Another thing too, I'm sure a lot of these parents went to the board meetings, and guess what they do at board meetings? They give you 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 2 minutes. And then the minute they're like, your time's up, and you gotta shut up and sit down. It's crazy. Okay, now we have Dr. LaQuisha Parrott's suspicious lack of memory. I should say that Dr. LaQuisha Parrott is no longer at Richneck, but she is the director of Newport News Elementary, which is a high-level administrative position. I think she's under, it's kind of like the assistant superintendent, because I looked up where these people had gone.
So she got a promotion.
I think it might have
Or
been
at
a
least
demotion. I think
Oh.
she might have been the superintendent at this district.
Oh,
And then,
okay.
yeah, but I'm not sure because I tried to trace the timeline. When Dr. Parrott testified, she had complete clarity as to her actions on the extremely chaotic and stressful day of January 6, 2023. She testified as to how she found out, who she was with, who she interacted with, where she went, and what she was doing. However, when Dr. Parrott was asked about the child's file that was in her home car, she had total amnesia as to how she got the file, why she got the file, when she got the file, for what purpose she had the file, and who gave her the file. Her answer to every question recording the file was, I can't recall.
She's gonna go downtown.
I think
When
those
you
records
get
are.
when you get called out in a grand jury and report, you're gonna get indicted.
Furthermore,
Because they were very clear on who they cleared and who they didn't clear.
they pretty much were. Yeah. Ms. Foster testified that Dr. Parrott had called her sometime after January 6, 2023, asking for the file, to which Ms. Foster directed her to the records manager. I wonder if that's really how it went down. Dr. Parrott testified that she had no idea at the time that the child had choked Ms. White, as it never came up in the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, so I need to read more of this. Dr. Parrott was also in a meeting during the 2022 semester with Dr. Herman, Dr. Parker, and Ms. Foster regarding the child's history as to why he was placed in the first grade when he hadn't completed kindergarten. So they did have a meeting about it. However, Dr. Parrott testified she had no idea at the time that the child had choked Ms. White, and it never came up in the meeting, even though that is the exact reason why they had the meeting. And Dr. Parker, who was well aware of the incident, was also in the meeting. Dr. Parrott claimed that she couldn't have known about the choking incident because as she was a new employee that year, she didn't have access to the student files until April 2023, which is when she would have found out. This is a very interesting admission because she did have the child's file on January 25th, 2023, when law enforcement were looking for it, and the choking incident wasn't actually in any of the files or records that law enforcement had received from the school. Thus, the question remains, how did Dr. Parrott find out from the files if there was no documentation of the incident recovered in the files? Yeah, it sounds like you're going down Dr. Parrott, huh?
Yeah.
In short, the special grand jury finds that Dr. Parrott's testimony highly suspicious and potentially obstructive of justice. There you go.
She's going down. Yep, she's done.
Dr. Ebony Parker's criminal liability. Oh, this is the best part. Dr. Parker's lack of response and initiative, given the seriousness of the information she had received on January 6, 2023, is shocking. This is only heightened by the fact that she was well aware of the child's past disciplinary issues and had been involved in the decisions to address his behavior, not just for the 2022-2023 school year, but also the 2021-2022 school year. Dr. Parker, with other administrators, are responsible for making poor decisions regarding the child prior to January 6, 2023, such as not providing him with certain behavioral resources sooner, require an alternative form of education that would have better suited his behavioral needs, dismissing his teacher's concerns, and allowing both of his parents to sit in a classroom full of children without even conducting a background check. However, Dr. Parker is criminally liable for her actions, or rather, her lack of actions on January 6, 2023 for child neglect pursuant to Virginia Code 18.2-371.1b. The charge of child neglect under this section requires a person responsible for the care of a child under age 18, by willful act or omission in the care of such child, was so gross, wanton, and culpable to show a reckless negligence for human life, reckless disregard. We will take note here that Ms. Foster, as principal, should have been informed of the firearm and the decision to not search the child. Ms. Foster testified that she was accessible throughout the day via her walkie-talkie. She apparently had one. Her lack of knowledge does not mean she is, per se, faultless for certain decisions as principal. Dr. Parker, in her duties and employment as assistant principal at Richneck Elementary, had the responsibility to care for the children in Ms. Zwerner's classroom and throughout the school. She had the decision-making authority, whether it came to suspensions, expulsions, or behavioral care available through the school system for each child. She also had the responsibility for the care of each child while in school. Most importantly, she then neglected to take any action upon receiving 4 reports of a potentially dangerous threat. And here's the 4 reports. First, starting at approximately noon, Dr. Parker was told by Ms. Kovac that 2 students informed her the child had a firearm in his backpack. Dr. Parker took no action. Second, at approximately 12:30 p.m., Ms. Kovac returned to tell Dr. Parker that she, Ms. Kovac, searched the backpack and did not find anything. However, Ms. Zwerner had texted Ms. Kovac about the child putting something in his pockets. Dr. Parker took no action. Third, Mr. Sims informed Dr. Parker about a call from Ms. West about the friend informing her that the child had a firearm. Dr. Parker took no action. Fourth, at 1:40 p.m., the counselor, Mr. Rawls, informed Dr. Parker that the child may have either a firearm or ammunition. He asked if he could search the child. Dr. Parker had the control to say yes and allow a search of the child's person. Dr. Parker refused and took no action. At 1:58 p.m., the child shot Ms. Zwerner with a firearm containing a total of 8 bullets in a classroom full of first grade students. Over the course of approximately 2 hours, Dr. Parker acted in complete disregard for the safety of all the children in Ms. Zwerner's class, all the children the child played with at recess, and all the children who could have been shot in the school. The special grand jury finds that Dr. Parker meets the threshold of probable cause to indict Dr. Parker for child neglect under Virginia Code that I read before very awkwardly, and I'm not going to repeat. And then they make recommendations to resolve the issues at Richneck. They make further recommended changes, and then there's a bunch of other stuff for the children and things like that. Dr. Parker is now on bail, and she is facing 8 counts of child neglect that carry a sentence of 5 years each. So she's facing up to 40 years in prison.
And she should get the max.
And a lot of people thought the Crumblies should too, but they served everything concurrently. So that is the special grand jury report about the shooting of Abigail Zwerner. What do you think?
I think, like I said at the beginning, that this is maybe the most disturbing, one of the most disturbing things I've ever read. It's just the lack of being a human being. Mm-hmm. A woman is shot, bleeding out in the office, and you just shut the door. and don't come back out until the cops come?
Somebody's random grandmother in the office
Is-
is helping this
Yeah,
woman.
she's taking care of the woman. She's applying pressure. She's waiting till the paramedics get there.
Did the
She's
woman
hiding
hate her
kids.
job? Did she hate teachers? Did she hate children? Was she that apathetic?
It never says in here how old she is, does it?
In the picture, she looks to be maybe late 40s.
Oh, so she is older.
She is an
So
older
it's
woman,
not
yeah.
like she
No, she's an older woman, yeah.
did her undergraduate,
40s,
got her
if not
master's, and
early
went right to her
50s.
doctorate before she ever got into the workforce.
40s, if not early 50s.
So this isn't her first go around. So she's been doing this for a while. And what there had to have been something in her past, because if you just look at her record, so she was under a doctor that first year that was mentioned in here.
Right.
So there was a doctor as a principal,
That's what I had
then
mentioned
she's
to
a
you.
doctor as a vice principal. Okay.
Most vice principals, as I pointed out to him, do not have a doctorate.
Right, but then the year that this happened, Principal Foster was just Principal Foster. She
Right.
wasn't Dr. Foster.
Right.
So how does just a non-PhD person get put in above you? So I don't know if she had some incidents in her record or something that was holding her back. I imagine it was.
If
this
anyone
is
has
any
a
indication.
child or has knowledge of this school, please leave us a comment, and we would love to talk to you.
But I'm surprised that she's that old. I'm
She's
thinking
at
that
least in
she's
her
brand
40s.
new
Yeah.
into the work environment.
No.
And I did have a question, and you didn't go over it, but
Okay.
all of these recommendations that the grand jury came back with for the school to implement,
Right.
who are they to say this is what you need to do? Or did they have experts come in to give them
They
that guidance?
said that they had some experts and they had community members.
Oh,
so they're
okay.
probably
So it wasn't
they,
just-
they were stakeholders.
Okay.
They had a stake in
That
the
makes
school,
more sense.
basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely had a stake in the school.
Yeah, that makes more
So,
sense.
yeah. So that's why they convened this.
Yeah.
And they said that they specifically picked people, when I listened to the press conference. The press conference with her lawyers is about 20 minutes if you want to watch it. It's all over YouTube. It seemed like that's why they did this.
Okay, that makes more sense then. That just struck me
And
as,
it's
okay,
just
who are these
crazy to me that the school board, says it's workman's
people? How
comp.
stupid is this school board?
I could
I mean,
see if a child throws a chair and you're in the way. I could see if a child accidentally staples your finger. Like, there are things that you expect to happen to a teacher.
Yes. Or you trip and fall down the steps,
Right,
or
right.
whatever, the normal workman comp things.
At our school,
But-
don't trip and fall down the steps because the camera will be shown to all your friends. We've had this happen with teachers.
But the fact that this school board is so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everybody has seen all of these lawsuits, and we can go all the way back to the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yes, we
So
do.
O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of murdering Nicole Simpson.
Right, yes.
But he was found civilly liable
Mm-hmm.
for a boatload of money, even though there was no conviction. And then you can just go through the timeline where these juries come back with these astronomical.
We were just talking about Maya. Take
Yeah.
care of Maya. What did she get, 225 million?
Yeah, they come back with these
But
astronomical
see, there's a
numbers.
thing where you normally can't sue a school as a government institution.
In this case, I don't think that's going to hold up. But
No.
if I was on the school board, I'd be like, let's just settle now so we can get out from under this.
Give her 20 million and get the heck out of here.
Yeah, just settle with her. Get done
Because
with
they're
it
going
and
to
move
have to
on.
pay all those legal fees for
Oh
this
my
to go
God.
to court and everything.
And then they're going to be liable for millions and millions and probably hundreds of millions of dollars.
Because if it is a jury trial, you're right. I think the jury gives her what they think she's owed.
Right, which is going to be a lot more than what she's asking.
I mean, and this young
And
woman,
that happens all the time.
this young woman had only been teaching 3 years.
Yeah.
She's young. This is her whole career.
Yeah.
Her career's done. I mean, I'm assuming she has such PTSD she could never set foot in a classroom again.
Now, I did have another question. Was this grand jury convened because of the workman's comp
Yes.
whole thing? So if the school board would have just settled with her
Well-
and got her to go away, all of this probably wouldn't have come out,
It
right?
was convened to investigate because of
Because of the workman's comp
right.
claim.
And actually, the Supreme Court said she can go she can go to trial.
Yeah, that-
But the
that workman's comp
the
is
school is
not-
appealing it.
Yeah, they came back and said workman's comp is not appropriate in this situation.
And the bullet is still in this woman. I can't even imagine being 23 years old.
No.
And she just looked like the sweetest, nicest person. I mean, what those elementary teachers do, you guys are the real MVPs. I mean, she had, welcome to my class, and she looked all pretty, and there was a sign, and please, I put like a couple motivational posters on the wall and stand at the door and sing to you, and that's your saying, you're welcome into my class. And most teachers don't even sing to the kids, but I like to sing to my students, so, because I'm that teacher. But anyway, like, I can't even imagine.
No. No, this was disturbing.
Yeah, so we did, like I said, we did go from our regular format. I read a lot because I thought that this was very important, that the important parts of this be read to someone.
And it does start you start to look at it now. More things are happening in a good way.
Yes.
The Crumbleys, that was a groundbreaking case that had never happened before. If this continues to go through, this is something that I don't think has ever happened before.
I think even Hannah Gutierrez will have some effect on this,
Yeah.
because that's another thing of being, wantonly neglectful of your duties. I think that was good for us too.
I think the nation as a whole has just had enough. And now, finally, things are starting to happen where maybe some real change can be talked about and be made. I mean, this case, it's going to bring attention, but it's not going to, real change is not going to come out of this until...
And now we just had the North Carolina incident where that teacher was slapped twice and they actually did arrest the student.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mentioned that to Mary. I'm like, this teacher was slapped, basically attacked by a student. The whole class is videotaped,
She was
tipping
sitting
and
and
laughing
never
their
even
asses
said
off.
anything. She was
No.
just sitting at her desk.
So everybody's like laughing and whooping it up, and of course, everybody has their phones out and taking videos. Well, the video was up for less than 2 hours, and the DA came in with charges.
Good.
It was like, okay, he's not messing around, and that's
And
what he
that
said.
is one good thing
I am
about
not
these
going to put
phones.
up with a government employee being attacked.
And that is one good thing about these phones. If this stuff does go down, it is videotaped. And
Everything is
yeah.
videotaped now.
I mean, look at what it did for Nikolai Mew.
Yeah.
That dude would have been intentional homicide
Yeah.
and four attempted homicides.
Yeah.
But luckily for the video, I mean, granted, he still got,
A lot.
40 to
Yeah,
60 years, but
yeah, he's gonna be.
it's not the rest of, well, it's probably the rest of his
Rest of
life.
his
But you know
life
what I'm
is an older
saying,
guy.
like, so, yeah, that is, I am totally fine with a video camera in every classroom. I'm fine with it as a teacher.
And it makes you wonder if you're not okay with it. What's going on in that classroom that you don't want everybody to see?
I don't
Because
want
there shouldn't be
parents-
anything going on in the classroom that
Right.
can't be seen.
I wouldn't want parents buzzing into my classroom to watch it, just because, but I'm fine with the video camera,
Right.
because I don't do anything that anybody can't see.
Exactly.
And if anything happens to me, my butt's covered,
Right.
So that is the case of Abigail Zwerner. We will follow this trial, and it should be very interesting. Hopefully there won't be a trial and they'll settle, but I don't think they're going to. I think they're going
You
all the
mean
way.
for the
For Abby, yeah.
There's going to be a trial for this.
And the
she-
trial for, yes.
She's going down.
Right.
She is going down hard, and I can't even I can't even imagine that if she is convicted on all these charges, where the judge does not throw the book at her.
I'm worried that it's gonna be a crumbly where she serves them concurrently.
The problem with the difference with the
You're right,
Crumbleys
yes.
versus this
Right.
is the Crumbleys were bad parents.
But
they
they-
were just
but
horrible
they-
parents,
but they
and they
purchased the
allowed
gun,
it to
though.
happen.
That's the difference.
They purchased the gun, but they weren't there. They weren't in a position to stop it. This woman, this could have been stopped
Now, we
so
should
easily.
say that the mother, Deja Taylor, she got 1.5 years in a federal facility and then 2 years in a state facility. Because one charge was a federal charge.
Exactly.
And then the I think the child.
And she's already
neglect
been convicted.
Was right, and they did say that she was a habitual drug user.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that in Dr. Bronte's video, yeah, so. This poor kid,
Well, it says it in here too. That she
I
was
mean, you're
convicted.
6 years old and you know how to choke somebody. I mean, and I had also heard that the reason why the kid knew where the gun was because 2 weeks earlier she had pulled a gun on a guy in a domestic incident.
Yeah.
So, this poor kid, they should have put him in special education. They should have gotten them the counseling. They should, you know what I mean? They should have. And then now you've got all these other kids who have been traumatized by this, you know? And this
Oh,
is
my
my
goodness.
problem. I, as a special
That
education
poor
teacher,
kid that is just, I tried to save you.
and kids think it's them, just like when parents get divorced, kids blame themselves, you know? I mean, and as a special education teacher, I 100% believe that every child deserves a free, appropriate public education, but I believe that it needs to meet their needs. This education was not meeting this child's needs, and because of him, was not meeting the needs of the other children.
And that's the issue I have a lot with a lot of these, is where these students are disrupting everybody.
Yeah.
So not only are they not learning anything, but they're inhibiting the learning of everybody else in that room. They're making the teacher's job 10 times harder than it needs to be, and they need to have, fine, they need to have an education, give them the education, but not in that classroom. You get them out, get them into a special program or whatever.
And I don't want to get too personal. This happened to me 2 days ago, and you see this as a teacher all the time. So the other teacher had to leave the room. There's two of us, we teach together, and they know when the other teacher leaves that if I'm helping a student, my back's turned. So all of a sudden I start helping students. These kids need help with their math. They need to be shown, and they have IEPs, and I'm there to work with them. And the behavior just gets so, because I can't, watch everybody at once while I'm helping the kid, they start acting up. And like I had to sit at my desk and sit and watch everybody until the teacher came back to help them. Like, this is what these kids do. One kid can just ruin education for your child. If you have the child who's doing what they need to do. And I'm like, guys, like, why do I have to do this? I'm here to help kids, and you're keeping me from helping them. Like, you're preventing me from doing my job, and that seems to work real well. Like, once they know that you're trying to do your job and you can't, for some reason that resonates with them. I don't know.
Well, you
why.
have a way of talking to them to make them, I don't know if you guilt them into it or I don't know what you do, but they seem to respond in most cases.
And what you said, I told my student teacher, I have 3 years to go when I'm out. Like, I'm at the end. And I told her, I said, these things that are happening are good for you. These are good for young teachers. Because this is the way we need the landscape of this country to be, so we can continue to have public education, because if we keep doing what we've been doing, we're not gonna have public education anymore,
I don't see us having public education, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's going away.
Things like this make me feel better about it. I think it might swing the other way.
I don't think it's going to. It's just going to continue to get worse until you can't do it anymore.
And what's interesting too? People are so negative about it. If you watch Teacher Therapy, I got interviewed, and my video just went up today. I wasn't trying to double dip in YouTube, but and all the comments are already negative. Like, I'm a special education teacher, so I could establish, rapport with these kids, or I work at a small rural school. Let me tell you, I worked in a juvenile detention facility and had good relations with my students. So it's just funny, like, everybody's just so negative about
And
education.
you worked in one of the bigger schools in the county that we lived in for the longest time.
With the
Worst of the worst.
17 emotionally disturbed kids locked up
Like
by a boiler room.
One of your students is in jail or just got out of jail?
Just got out of jail, for murder. So, it's really interesting, because he committed the murder when he was 14. But, it's just really interesting. Just everybody's just so negative about, and this is the landscape of the country today.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It really is.
I'm very fortunate. I love my students. My administration is great. I'm fortunate to do what I do. But, and I told him, if I got hurt, I'd be out. Life is too short, and I am too old to be getting hurt, so.
Well, you should have taken the hint when you were student teaching and you got stabbed with the play scissors in kindergarten.
No, they were real. They were just
real?
not pointed. Yes, yeah, that was my first. Oh Lord. Maybe we'll have a day of Mary's teaching horror stories one
There
day.
you
We'll
go.
do like a little, do like a little story time. So that is the case of Abigail Zwerner. This should be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch the trials and watch the lawsuit and things.
And
like
it's
that.
also going to be interesting to see if this starts a ball rolling with some real changes across the country.
And
in
if
terms of
anybody's from
education.
that area and knows anything, please, leave us a comment. We would love to talk to you. We'd love to interview you. Lord, I would kill to have Abby interview with us, but she probably won't. She's like on the Today Show and things like that.
Yeah.
So the wine.
The wine, it is a repeat, only because I was drinking alone the other day, so there was a lot
I drink
left.
alone. Da, 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 da.
But this is our Petite Mensing from Effingham.
Barbara, it's just as amazing the second time.
Yeah, it really is good. So, and I think you described it perfectly. It's like a Riesling.
It's the Riesling of the South.
Yeah.
We should like get that. We should get that patented.
Yeah, the
We should
Riesling
get
of the
that.
South.
Yeah, we should. We're gonna hit up the patent office.
But this was a great winery in Virginia. We just sort of happened upon it.
I bet you Ryan
driving
Anderson
home.
would love this wine. He's got that soft southern style now.
Ryan Anderson is all about Boone's Farm, and you know it.
Boone's Farm and a side of Schlitz.
Yep.
Schlitz isn't a southern beer. That's a
Pennsylvania beer.
That's a Scranton thing.
Yep.
So we are True Crime and Wine Couple. We probably rambled way too much at the end of this video. Catch us in the next one. We're coming at you with some more Nicole Kessinger, everybody's favorite 304.
Have a good night.
Stay thirsty, our friends.